My name is Mike Cassidy, and here this afternoon we're on the south side of beautiful Prince Edward Island. And here in Hampton, Prince Edward Island, we've been very fortunate to what we call as a family our country retreat. It's 93 acres that runs from the Trans-Canada Highway through a red clay dirt road all the way down to 2,500 feet of shoreline. We have our summer residence. We have open land. As I say, we have the red dirt roads. You have the trails through the woods, and we have our Haskap and lavender farm. Something that's very close to our family, but more importantly, in the last 7 years that we have been here, we have learned to believe and understand nature and the environment. And when I say that, when you come from the city of Charlottetown, you've got streetlights, you've got urban landscape, and you never stop to think about wind velocity, wind direction, tides, low tide, high tide. What would that mean? What about ice building up on the shoreline and what that would do to your land? So definitely, by being in Hampton, Prince Edward Island, living on the shore, you have a completely different perspective of who we are, what we are, and why we have to protect what we have. Because this shoreline needs protection. It's very fragile. And when we have to come to a consensus as a population that something that is fragile needs protection. One thing that you do learn when you have passion about a piece of property and you want to protect it is how is it being destroyed through climate change? And one way, when I started to work with the PEI Climate Lab, it's great to say, do you know what? That stick that was there last year, right on the shoreline, is no longer there. Well, a little piece of evidence, but how much real data can we gather from this stick that used to be on the shoreline that's no longer there? So what we have done through the PEI Climate Lab, we have 10 surveying spots where we have pins staked out, and appreciate the fact we have close to 2,500 feet of shoreline, some in very soft cliff areas, some in good rock base underneath the cliff, but we wanted to collect data on an annual basis. What is the erosion here along my property in Hampton? So when you put up physical markers throughout a 2,500 foot span, we come each and every year in May and June, and we measure the distance from the physical marker that we have put in place to the actual shoreline. And naturally, each and every year, your shoreline erodes. You start to lose. Good data, the question is how much per year? Now, we've been doing this for 6 years with measurement. On average, through my 10 surveying points, we are losing 20 centimeters per year. Now, appreciate the fact, the average to date on Prince Edward Island is 28 centimeters, which is roughly 1 foot. So we're a little bit less than 1 foot at 20 centimeters. Good news, we have factual, measurable data that we can compare year to year. Also with the PEI Climate Lab, they have a drone. So what we do on the ground is reconciled with the measurement that the drone takes each and every year in May and June, and we can compare what the drone measures from above to what we actually do on the ground. The drone, a little bit more specific, because appreciate the fact we have 10 physical measuring stakes that we actually measure ourselves each and every year. The drone is more efficient than ourselves. They go through 2,500 feet of shoreline and they measure 456 points. So then when you start talking about averaging You're getting not an average of 10 spots over 2,500 feet, but you're getting an average of 456 spots. The drone is averaging 25 centimeters per year. So we are below the average on Prince Edward Island of 28 centimeters. But when you collect data, it's great to have annual comparable data, but we have to really understand what does average mean. And when I said earlier, my shoreline has soft cliff, that red island soil that's so beautiful to see, but it's very soft and it's very fragile. We have good rock base areas that help protect the cliffs in certain portions of my 2,500 feet. And here's what we're finding. On my property right here, the 2 points, I span 340 feet. So at one of my points at the shoreline, we're losing an average of 6 centimeters per year. At the other end of my property, on the same shoreline, we're averaging 3 centimeters per year. Very, very close. There's a good rock base underneath my cliff, which helps protect my erosion. You go 40 feet west, and we're seeing erosion perhaps at 32 centimeters, some years at 27 centimeters. You can go further west where it's soft cliff, and you can be up to 50 centimeters. So as much as we can say, in Hampton, Prince Edward Island, on Mike Cassidy's property, we average 20 centimeters, it's concerning when we look at different areas on the cliff that it's greater than the average. So you ask the question, why? We have determined that a southeast wind tide event, a southeast storm, and we can have them at any time of year, but my wife and I come out even in the wintertime after a southeast event because we know we're going to see damage. Somehow in a southeast wind tide, ice being moved into the shore, we just see the shore being taken right away from us. So that's a very interesting phenomena. When we talk about the prevailing winds on the south side of Prince Edward Island, a southwest wind, we have a point called Signature Rock, and it actually protects our area here when it comes from the southwest. But we don't have that same type of protection when you see the open water coming from the southeast. But interesting enough, Signature Rock is such a great point to protect my land and my shoreline, but this year, for the first time ever, it is starting to crumble. You can actually take your hand and you can just wipe the cliff and it just crumbles. All of the clay and the red dirt of Prince Edward Island drops to my feet. Very interesting. So now we're wondering, what is causing the cliff to actually crumble and decay? And now I'm worried about the next event when it hits that particular point. Whether it's wind, whether it's high tide, whether it's ice, what is it going to do to the point? How do we look at water runoff? Because many of us say we have erosion because it comes from the sea. We have rising water levels, we do have the tides, we do have the wind, we do have the ice. But water runoff from the land, down the land, over the cliff, down onto the shore. How much of an event, how much damage has that caused? So when you start to believe in what the PEI Climate Lab is doing and having them as a partner where we can look at data both on the ground, in the air, and make our observations year to year. Because there's 3 or 4 of us involved at the PEI Climate Lab, this is our property. We know it now after 6 years. We now really want to come here throughout the year and observe and measure and be able to compare the data. Our home is 350 feet from the cliff, 350 feet from the shoreline. So do I have 350 years before the water ever creeps up to our home? Perhaps I do. But what happens if we have rising sea levels combined with coastal erosion? How long does anybody's home have if you're on the shore? 350 feet is a tremendous distance. There's beautiful homes. There's businesses that are right on the shoreline that we depend upon the shore, let's say, for the beauty of our business. We depend upon the shore for the beauty and the landscape of where we live. But the question is, how long can we live? How long can we do business in this beautiful area of Prince Edward Island if we do not accept the fact that the shoreline is fragile, it's here today, but it could be gone tomorrow? Well, you know, when you gather data, and you gather data for a reason, because you want to make sure that you want to save your land. As we all know, they're not making any more land. What are my options? What do I see on Prince Edward Island? First, anybody who lives on Prince Edward Island, anybody who comes to Prince Edward Island, blue water, blue sky, red cliff shoreline. It's our signature statement. It's our brand of who we are. The farm fields, those red dirt clay roads, boundaries of spruce trees and birch trees. That's who we are on Prince Edward Island. So what do we do to the shore? How do we protect it? And there had been, years ago, somebody would say, well, you know, let's armor it. And someone would say, excuse me? What does let's armor it mean? Well, let's bring in those great big granite rocks, or let's bring in those great big red island sandstones, push them all up against the cliff. So they're going to stand there like soldiers of war. Come at me tides, come at me ice, come at me water, come at me wind. Nobody is going to take the soil from behind my back. Well, you know what? If you're really interested, look at some of this rock that has been in place for the last 20 years. And you will come to the conclusion, costly to put in, but over time, water, wind, tide, current, ice, it's got its way of getting in behind these soldiers that stand so tall and so tight. They whittle in behind the rock. And what do? They pull the cliff back out. And literally, the rock starts to crumble itself. It starts to drop. And as soon as water, wind, tide gets 1 inch inside that armor, it comes at it in full force. And you can see where we have cliffs, even with the rock armor protection, it only lasts for so long. Can we have plant life? Can we have the marram grass that can help protect? So rather than putting in the rock, do we actually use plant life, vegetation to assist? Is there going to be a technology in the future that can help and actually guarantee that shoreline won't erode? Maybe, but I guarantee you it's going to be costly. So where's the other solution? The solution is right in front of us, but we don't want to accept it. That's why we have a PEI climate change. Let's use the word. Let's say it again. Climate change. We are creating some of the coastal erosion based on what we do, based on what we have, what we're allowed to do when we don't want to protect. When we don't want to have a love for where we live, and we want to help destroy. I am in the bus business. Do I not think each and every day of the amount of diesel that I burn in my buses? Why was I 25 weeks ago the first bus company to have an electric motor coach in Canada to try to show the province of Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick electric propulsion? Why do we have to rely on diesel? Because somehow, when we think of all our CO2 emissions, what we are doing, we know that with climate change comes rising sea levels, the rising temperatures that we have, coming onto our shore to see what we have. And I want to tell you, they're thieves, they're robbers. They don't care that we love what we have on the shoreline and we want to protect it. Nature will come and steal from us. if we don't respect and love nature, the consequence of our actions is that nature will come and it will take from us. And that's why we have to be so concerned about climate, because it's costly to protect shoreline. We don't have all of the evidence yet as to what is the best shoreline protection, but we do know respecting our climate will assist us in all areas of life. I can go from the shore. I farm. I am right next to land where it's what we call the rotation of crops, where one year you could have the potatoes, the next year you can have a grain, the next year you could be into a hay, then you could be maybe into a mustard crop that helps the iron worm within our soils. But you have crops that come and go. And every time crops come and go, as a farmer, you have to plow, you have to till, you have to harrow, you have to expose the soil. And as soon as you expose that beautiful red soil, anybody flying over Prince Edward Island, we look like a quilt. And you see our farm crops, and you can see these fields in the spring. Some of them are left open, red for the winter. And now we have wind erosion. Nature comes and just takes the soil, the topsoil, right away from our fields. So we have a crop, what we call the perennial crop, where we have our crop in the ground that stays in the ground with no plowing, no tilling each year for 30 years. So you have your plants, you have the matting put down for your plants, you have the grass pasture in between your plant rows. There is no wind, there is no erosion. How significant is wind erosion? How damaging is it? We have a building alongside a field that every 3 years becomes potatoes. So therefore, with crop rotation, as I just mentioned, the field itself becomes red. It's plowed. I've got soil. The wind comes to take the soil. On the side of the building, over the winter, the wind acts like an abrasive sandpaper. It picks up this red soil that is so beautiful when you see it in our beautiful island landscape pictures. It actually takes that soil, runs it right alongside my building, and literally takes the stain right off my building. That's the power of the wind and erosion. So when you stop and think about it, we're losing part of our fields. What is the solution? Well, maybe it's not crops that need crop rotation, maybe it's the hascap plants that we have. It's the lavender plants that we have. And when you see the grass in between the rows, when you see the plants all in a particular row where there is no soil exposed, there is no erosion. So whether we talk soil, whether we talk coastal, everybody, regardless if you live in Prince Edward Island or wherever you live in this world, today is the day that we have to say, we respect where we live and we're going to protect where we live.